From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We are joined, as always, with our super producer, Alexis, codename Doc Holliday Jackson. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. It is the top of the week. We have returned from adventures. Sneak peek behind the curtain, folks. Not to put you on blast, codename Doc, but Doc has been traveling even more than the three of us. I think we're all going to be on the road increasingly as the calendar year continues, pending future versions of COVID and or World War III. But as long as the lights stay on for this little thing called humanity, we are going to be bringing this show to you. Strange News, one of our favorite weekly segments. We're talking about coming back from the dead. No kidding. We're talking about some of the dangerous deep fake potential that we described at length in earlier episodes. We're seeing some of the rubber hit the road there. And then we're going to talk about some more corporate malfeasance in a way that definitely affects you if you live in the United States. It's a huge bummer, but it's very true. So maybe before we dive into that stuff, folks, what do you think? We start with coming back from the dead. You want to do like a Flatliners kind of experimental thing? Yeah? Are we on board?
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah. Okay,
Is
great.
That the
Great.
one with, was Kiefer Sutherland in that? Wasn't he?
He very much was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Kiefer Sutherland of Dark City fame. I understand he's done another movie or two in his time. He also has a great presentation available on YouTube now about unionization, and it comes from his unionization and partisan politics. It's introduced by him, but it's a speech from his grandfather. Do check it out.
And like many grizzled Hollywood actors of a certain age, he has a kind of country western band.
Oh, I did not know that. Did not know. Well, this is our starting point here. We didn't see Kiefer Sutherland coming in as a reference, but this is a story that would interest you if you are, let's see, if you're a fan of Flatliners, sure. If you're a fan of not dying, you'll probably be into this. So we know a little bit about the brink of death. At this point, no one in the human species has come up with an idea about the end of life that satisfies everyone. Some people have very specific spiritual beliefs, right? Some people are more hardline atheists, right? The idea being that when the physical activity of the brain ceases, the thing that you think of as yourself, well, metacognition there, also ceases to exist. And because of the great disagreements in the metaphysical and spiritual realms, most of what humans can say about death has to rely on what we can observe in the physical world, has to rely on science, right? So if your brain doesn't have access to oxygen for a certain amount of time, then you will almost certainly fall victim to brain damage, damage to your cognition. You can have something called brain death. Sometimes people do come back from it, and sometimes even hibernation can save people. This still is just a measure of extraordinary circumstances. The main rule for in excess of 90+% of these occurrences is that around 15 minutes after a mammal's brain is cut off from an oxygen supply, the brain will die. That means that no matter what, there was no way back. Up until today. So here's what happens. We've talked about experimentation. I know that I've been talking about a lot about animal experimentation, from de-extinction last week to a couple of other cool things like chimera and organ transplants. But this one really caught my eye. Just very recently, just a few weeks ago, the journal Nature published an astonishing new study. And I want everybody to check out an excellent article on Vox by Brian Resnick about this. I'm not going to give you the headline yet, but here it is. You know, the brain is one of the hungriest, most resource-sucking organs in the human body. It needs a lot of stuff. It doesn't get its oxygen. It doesn't hibernate or anything like that. The cells of the brain starve. Some burst open. There's a domino effect. A feedback loop gets created. Death. And for a long time, this was thought to be an irreversible pattern across all mammals. You can't bring the brain back. Until these researchers took 32 pigs and did just that. They took these pigs, 32 had been slaughtered for food, and the scientists, led by Nanad Seston over at Yale, they took just the pig's brains and they waited for 4 hours. And then for 6 hours, they hooked them up to a system named Brain EX, and it pumped those brains full of a proprietary mixture containing oxygen, nutrients, and some kind of protective chemicals, we could call them. At the end of that, so it's 4 hours waiting, 6 hours pumping this weird elixir into them. After 10 hours, they found that the pig brains were not just largely intact, more intact than one would expect if you're talking about just a regular decaying brain, but individual brain cells came back. They were up and running after 4 hours. Compare that to 15 minutes. After 4 hours, they were taking oxygen, they were producing carbon dioxide, and they were alive. What do you guys think? Science fiction? Science fact?
This is an actual study. That's a real thing, right? Brain X system is real. It was conducted. Whether it should have been, that's for us humans, the rest of the humans to decide. Ben, this is horrifying to me. Amazing and horrifying. Can you imagine if you? I'm just thinking of the neural connections that the brain has to the rest of the pig that is no longer there. And if you're waking the brain up, do we know if it was bringing it back from the dead, or if it was just parts of it that were alive?
Right. It was that's an excellent question, Matt. So it was bringing back cells, right? But it's not the same thing as bringing back the entirety of the brain. To be very, very clear, and they outline this in the journal article and in the other stuff you'll see written about it. The neurons in these brains were not communicating. So as far as we know, this is why I bring up the spiritual stuff first. As far as we know, that means that they are not qualifying for the scientific definition of consciousness, right? Which would be neurons actively communicating with one another. So if you just had, like I suspect you may have had, Matt, fellow conspiracy realist, if you just had a terrifying moment where you thought of an animal intelligent as a young human, just wondering where its limbs are and screaming into the darkness with no mouth to scream, shout out Ellison, then you can save yourself from that. The cells were alive, which is not the same thing as the consciousness returning.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking that yet, but now I am, and it's really upsetting.
That's exactly what I was
Can
thinking.
You imagine?
Wow.
Yeah, kill me. One of those moments. Also, who knows if all of a sudden you flash back to reality, gravity, mom spaghetti, and all that, and you're just in excruciating pain, or you just the phantom limb sensation is just enough to instantly drive you mad. And you make the point, Ben, pigs are considered to be some of the more intelligent four-legged creatures. You compared it to the cognition of a small child. Is that pretty much supported by research?
Yeah, pigs are incredibly intelligent. I just want to ruin everybody's delicious bacon moment later. Pigs are smarter than dogs. They're on par with, or maybe even a little smarter than the average 3-year-old human. So that is true. That is indisputable. And of course, your individual pig mileage may vary. I'm not saying there aren't some dumb pigs out there, right? Because that's how mammals roll. It's an average. But But
these mammals will roll in their own feces, which is a thing that maybe makes you think they might not be super smart, but maybe to each his own in that respect as well, I suppose, right?
Yeah, humans do a lot of things that other animals would doubtly find inexplicable or dumb. Adult humans do a lot of things that 3-year-olds rightly question. I was talking to a 3-year-old friend of my family one time, and this kid, very smart kid, she was like, why do people wear ties? Like neckties? And I didn't really have an answer for her. Because it's a dumb thing to do. It doesn't really, it's a fashion thing, right? We do have a brain stuff video on why people probably ended up wearing ties, but it's a story for another day. The cool thing about this is it ties into something else that we've talked about in the past, which is the problem with making serious progress in a political system, honestly, like a lot of democracies, because big gains in the world, big progress is often a long-term game, right? So if you have someone who's elected for 2 years or someone who's elected for 4 years, regardless of their political party, they're usually going to be centered on making changes that are apparent within that time window such that they can be reelected, which is why you don't see a lot of grand, 50-year plans come to fruition all that often, at least here in the U.S.
Not to mention that if you laid out the groundwork for that, the person that succeeds you could just reverse everything you've done anyway. So the system's not even designed for those kinds of long-term plans because there's so little consensus, from term to term.
Unfortunately true, especially when you're talking about scoring political points. And
right.
This is a point that is not necessarily party specific. It's important to point that out. So
yeah, of course.
Here's why I'm bringing up the politics part of it, though. This piece is following the Brain X system. Again, Brain EEX comes out of something from the National Institute of Health, the Brain Initiative. It is acronym time. I don't know if we have a sound cue for that, but who doesn't love a good acronym? I certainly do. Brain Initiative stands for Brain Research Through Advancing Innovative Neurotechnologies. This came from the Obama administration, from their idea years back to map the human brain and thus create new tools to study it. This actually reached fruition in some way. It has measurable progress. If we being the scientists involved, have conclusively poked a hole into the old belief that there was a time limit on brain cell death, then this has much, much more potential than just causing a possible existential crisis for pigs that have been brought back from the dead. First you have to figure out how to bring the whole brain back, right? How do we get the thought, the you, up and running? And well, it poses some really cool stuff. Let's be honest, the badger in the bag here, the elephant in the room, is the idea that one day you could help revive people's brains after massive trauma, right? Like a stroke or something, or maybe even sometime in the future, brain death. But for right now, the more realistic idea is one that is a little bit ethically sticky. What if we could partially bring back brains? What if we never figure out how to do it the whole way, but we could partially bring back brains such that we can test drugs and disease pathways or the progression of disease in the brain? Typically, that's going to be okay for many parts of the world as long as the brains are non-human, up to and including chimpanzees or something, But again, the biggest progress or the most promising potential for progress is going to be found in pulling a Lazarus on a human brain and then using it. And that is where we get into very dangerous waters. So at this point, this may be an episode in the future. We've got our eyes, ears, currently living brains on the story, and we'll report back with an update. But in the meantime, what do you think? At what price progress would you agree to support this kind of research on pigs or on other mammals, or indeed on human beings who had donated their brains and bodies to science? Or do you think it's too much of a dark art? Would love to hear your thoughts. 1-833-STD-WYTK, conspiracy.iHeartRadio.com. We're going to pause for a word from our sponsor, and then we'll be on to even stranger news.
And we're back with what Ben has promised is a stranger news story than pigs' brains in jars.
That might be too much of a promise.
I hope I can meet that very high bar. I'm not sure if I can, but I will certainly try. Matt, you had something that you wanted to add to the pigs' brains in jars convo, I believe, before we moved on.
It just really quickly is making me think about last week and the box of human heads that was discovered, and just made me think, oh, what were they really doing with that box of heads? Ben, do you think they're hooking them up? I don't know. I hope not.
Well, you know me. I hope so for science, but I'm the worst person to ask.
Okay. All right. That was it.
All right. So in other, bizarro developments of the future, which also is the present, we've got a bit of an update or sort of an escalation to a story that I did last week that we had a fun time talking about. It's definitely some nightmare fuel, Black Mirror type material, but just the evolution, the very quick evolution of the deep fake. You've got shades of deep fakes from what's called cheap fakes, which are like, using an app essentially to manufacture a not particularly convincing video forgery of a person. Like you've seen those apps that like you can be Rose, holding Leo and promising him that he can fly, or whichever way that scenario goes. Say he'll never let go. It can be you and like your significant other or your mom. You can do that all through an app that I think uses internet resources to actually make those video composites. Otherwise, I imagine it would take up way too much space on your device. Point being, shades of this stuff, from very silly and gimmicky to shockingly real, and to some that are kind of in the middle. And we are now seeing this coming into play in the conflict in Ukraine, where some deep fakers used this technology to manufacture a video of Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky commanding, essentially, or at least, urging Ukrainian soldiers and civilians and, people basically standing up for and defending the country against the Russian invaders to lay down their arms. Didn't do a particularly good job because I don't think anybody bought it. It was more on the cheap fake side than it was a full on deep fake. And the differences are huge. But the point is, we are starting to see a world where you can really understand how incredibly damaging that would be, especially in some of these types of situations. You might have a leader that goes into hiding, in some kind of bunker. Zelensky has really gotten a lot of attention because he hasn't been doing that. He's like, actively doing videos and tweets and stuff from his office. Like, he is making no secrets about where he is, which I think is, very brave, perhaps a little stupid, but I think ultimately very brave and admirable. It's just, he represents something very powerful, and it would be a real bummer. And I think a real hit in morale if he were to, be killed, or if his office were to be bombed, or maybe it would be just the kind of groundswell that's needed. But unfortunately, more morale isn't necessarily what wins wars. It's more like monetary assistance from other countries and more weaponry. But that is yet to be seen as to, how much aid the U.S. ends up giving Ukraine. But that's not the point. The point today is deep fakes and just like social media infiltration is becoming a big part of the conversation. There's another article that I saw. Essentially, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of Zelensky impersonators on social media working towards various goals. Anything you can think of, right? So there's a lot of, again, because Zelensky's getting this kind of deified treatment in the West and obviously in Ukraine, people posing as Zelensky are trying to get people to give money. It ultimately just ends up being a scam, or trying to kind of like sway the discourse around the war in Ukraine, for better or worse. It's all very vague as to like what the aims of all of these people. There's too many to to follow. It says here, according to Forbes, because of Zelensky's success in connecting with people, like, as in being kind of the people's president, he has become a very popular tool for internet impersonators who are trying to use that status to get what they want. And there have been fake impersonator accounts popping up on everywhere from Instagram to Twitter to Telegram, which is like an encrypted chat and image sharing platform. Here's a quote from Yoav Karen, who's the CEO of Brand Shield, which is a company that has devised technology to scan the internet to analyze threats and detect things like phishing, hacks, and online brand abuse and trademark infringement. They said, she had this to say, since the beginning of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we've identified a major spike in profiles impersonating Zelensky. She goes on to say, during our last scan, we detected 45 impersonators on Facebook, 39 on Twitter, 20 on Instagram, 22 on Telegram, and 155 on VK, the Russian social media platform. Between impersonations of Ukrainian President Zelensky on social media, hacks distributing fake messages from Zelensky, and website impersonations and typo squatting attacks on Privatbank, Ukraine's biggest bank, we're seeing a broad mix of fake online profiles as well as scammers looking to capitalize on the crisis. During periods of peace, cybercrime is a genuine risk to average consumers, and companies and organizations look to protect their reputations. However, during times of conflict, cyber attacks pose an even greater threat, both physically and financially, to those who are already being battered by war. I think this number seems small to me. I would think there'd be way more than that, but maybe it's just kind of starting to take off. I don't know.
It depends on the criteria used to define that. You have to differentiate between like something that's obviously meant to be fake or something that's obviously like satire. So I bet there's a lot of satire out there that's knowingly, with a nod and a wink.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I'm not quite sure what the criteria is, but it would definitely fall under like they are trying to create an account that has the feeling of being a genuine account. But also, I think most people know that the account of a person as public as Zelensky is going to have some sort of verification. So I don't know if these accounts are verified or have people are just kind of, being taken for a ride and aren't like doing their homework or are not aware of those things. Unclear. And we also don't know to what degree these fraudulent accounts are having success or are making an impact. But the fact is that they do exist. I don't know. This to me is just like, this social media stuff is sort of the low-tech version of what we're seeing with the deep fakes. And as we've talked about in previous episodes and in the last segment when we talked about the new president of South Korea's deep fake that is very clearly, acknowledged as being a deep fake. It's not really trying to trick anybody. It could, I suppose. There is a disclaimer text, in the videos that says that it's an AI-generated avatar, but enough people maybe don't care or aren't looking for that. But again, it's not really intended to deceive. So it's a different flavor, but it still has this real slippery slope kind of quality. With this, if this was pulled off successfully, or if you had a really high quality deep fake of a leader saying they were going to deploy nuclear weapons or something, could cause a panic, in the event of an actual war, it could cause tactical misfires. It could cause all kinds of havoc. I don't know, Matt, what do you think? Do you see this as kind of like an escalation of the type of astroturfing and, social media manipulation that we've seen for years now? Is this like sort of the next generation of that? And have we seen the height of it yet?
I think it's probably state actors and those who just feel some type of way on either side of the conflict. They're just using one of the weapons that they have at their disposal. There's been a lot of psychological warfare going on during this conflict. It comes from both sides. It always does. No matter what war, no matter what's going on, there's psychological warfare as part of it. It's an aspect. And for me, I think we're just in general in a really tight spot. Think about when you're scrolling through whatever social media, we're used to seeing one of the main things that we see are reposts. Where somebody takes content that's already been generated somewhere and then manipulates it in some small way, then reposts it as their own thing. And I think a lot of us are maybe accustomed to just taking whatever that content is at face value and then moving on. And if we, get bombarded with, even if it's a deep fake and pretty clearly a deep fake, it has the potential to dig in somewhere in our mind and, make
Just
us
so.
believe something that isn't true. I think this is honestly pretty scary, knowing that we're here. And if the conflict escalates even further and spreads out in other parts of Europe and other parts of the world, or engulfs, part of the South China Sea or something, I think we're in a dangerous spot with this tech.
I want to add something there, Matt, because I love that you're pointing this out. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I think this is very important for people to know. So if you are a longtime listener of Stuff They Don't Want You to Know, first off, thank you. But it may be tough for some of us in the audience to realize that you probably have a higher than average level of what I would call media literacy. So you know the basic hygiene of observing something and determining whether it purports to be true or whether it is in fact sincere. A lot of people, and this doesn't mean it's not anything about their intelligence. It's just questions they haven't thought to ask or haven't been taught to ask. A lot of people won't have that moment where they pause and say, hold on, I thought this Zelensky guy was kind of against Russia, right? Instead, they'll say, oh, this must be the news. And that is something that the news cycle uses, and that internet online communication uses to great success, for better or for worse. Always question sources, this show included. And that's what I always want to hit when we're talking about this. And please check out, because like we had predicted this, that the next big conflict would involve information warfare on an unforeseen scale. And this is part of it, but it's also, again, democratized, right? Because the technology is out there to create these deep fakes. Noel, you make a great point. The South Korean president-elect's avatar is tailored to different audiences, but is transparent. So I wouldn't say, like you point out, I'm just agreeing that that is not a deep fake, but I would say, I don't like using this phrase all the time, but now more than ever, please check the sources. If it's like Washington, whatever you care, like whatever your opinion of WashingtonPost.com is, check the website just to make sure it's not like WashingtonPost.co.fr or something like that, That's an example. I don't know if that's a real site, but also dig a little deeper. You know what I mean? Figure out if the people who are telling you something are really who they want you to think they are. And it's just going to continue. It's escalating.
Speaking of, this kind of media or technology literacy, our company pretty regularly sends us these emails to try to test us to see if we are any good at that and to see if we're going to fall for a phishing scam or whatever. And I fell for one the other day. It was it looked like it was coming from an internal email address. It was something about a fax or whatever. And I was I've never really gotten a fax. I fell for the fax one, dude. And then I got shamed. I got hard, but dude, it literally, I clicked on the sender and it had an email address that was in our domain. It wasn't some alias, and usually that's the giveaway. So I definitely checked it because I thought it was odd. But then I was like, well, maybe I did get a weird fax from some marketing thing for a book they want us to review. Who knows? Some people still send faxes. But my point is, I consider myself quite media literate, as all three of us are, and technology savvy, and I totally fell for that one and felt like a real dope. So that's the point, is as things are more and more saturated, and as newer and newer technology arrives, that level of rigor and paying attention is going to become more and more important than ever. You gonna rag me a little more about falling for the fax scam, Matt?
No. Sorry,
I hear the shade in your voice. You think I don't hear?
I'll give you a list of the silly things that I've fallen for in my life.
Okay,
it's a lot. It's very long.
Let's go. Rattle it off right now. Shame yourself for once.
I fully shame myself. All the shame.
No shame, Matt. But my point is, these things are easy to fall for, and it's tough. You have to be vigilant. And to your point, Ben, you have to vet these things. And we need a system that can kind of, offer some verification of this footage, and of these videos. Otherwise, it could really become a problem. But then it's also if it's a video of somebody saying something very pointed and it's like a speech, right? Not some candid dirt video of a Russian pee-pee tape or something like that. then the actual person could come out and just say, no, that was definitely not me. And that seems like it would ring true, because if they're saying something in an authoritative way directly to the people and then come out and say, hey, that wasn't me, why would you not believe them? You know what I mean? If it was like presented in an official capacity, but maybe it would be too late, right? So I don't know. It's very, very, very spooky.
For sure.
Let's give that a think and have a break, and then we'll be back with one more escalatingly stranger piece of listener mail. I guarantee.
It's just getting so strange in here now.
Oh my God!
And we're back. All right, everyone, let's take a moment and think about all of the personal care products we used this morning or last night as we were, doing maybe a shower routine, maybe, getting ready for the day, washing off your face.
Tears of lying children. Gotcha.
Yes, man, all of those things.
Yeah.
You use their tears?
Only the lying children. Only the lying children. But I think you're going somewhere with it. This has shades of some previous episodes we did, wherein
it does.
I also predicted that this would get worse. What was it? We ruined sunscreen for everyone?
Yes, almost exactly this time last year, we ruined sunscreen. I'm putting that in quotations when we talked about a chemical called benzophenone. I think that's how you say it. And it was discovered in many sunscreen products or sun protection products, however you want to say that. And it was a real issue. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe one of the same independent study companies, the companies that do independent studies on consumer products, is involved in this new thing that we're going to be talking about today. The company is titled Valisure, Valisure. You can check out their website, valisure.com. You can read. It's mostly a blog there, like write-up of some of the things they've done. There's also some analysis you can access there. And I'm going to talk about them really quickly before we hit the headlines. So Valisure is an interesting company. You can go to their about page and learn about them, so as we say. And this is a company that noticed there were discrepancies in many consumer-facing products that were available to regular customers like us. And they noticed that there were batch variances, that there were ingredient variances in different batches that were produced by the same company. It's supposed to be the same product, and there's differences in what's actually inside that thing. And in particular, I think the story, at least according to the website, is that one of the founders suffered from complications caused by this variability. And it was according to them, it was an anticonvulsant medication that had some variants, caused problems for him. So now what they want to do is protect the world from this kind of problem, right? It's very noble. It's good. You don't have to fully buy into the story of the company to know that the research they're conducting is important, because they are finding that this kind of variance is widespread. So let's go over to The Guardian for our headline here. Carcinogenic chemical benzene found in hundreds of U.S. personal care products. Now, the last thing we looked at in sunscreen was benzophenone. This is benzene. A little different. Benzene is actually, in my opinion, quite a bit scarier. Agreed. This study and the studies come to us pretty much from the end of last year. I believe it was November, December when the product testing was actually occurring. It's just now being reported on in The Guardian. This is written by Tom Perkins, published March 18th, 2022. And it's discussing just the widespread issue here. I'll give you a quote. Valisure has tested to date 662 items, these are consumer products, and found the chemical in 180 of those 662 items, or about 27% of products. Why is that bad? Why is that scary? Benzene is Benzene, as stated in the title of this article, is a cancer-causing chemical. It causes leukemia, which means cancer of the blood-producing cells, the stuff that actually makes the white blood cells in your body. And there are many different kinds of leukemia where different types of blood cells, different types of blood-producing cells are affected. It is very, very dangerous. And it has been banned, by the way, by the FDA as of, I think 40 years ago, maybe even longer than that, 45 years ago. The United States, through the Food and Drug Administration, banned benzene as an ingredient. So something you would actually read on a label.
Mm-hmm.
But what they didn't ban is the use of benzene in the production of other chemicals and other substances, which would then be used as an ingredient. And that's where we have our problem.
Yeah, it's kind of like, just for a comparison, to get past maybe some of the chemistry weeds here, it's kind of like how if someone had an allergy to tree nuts, they couldn't eat stuff that had tree nuts as an ingredient, but they could still encounter dangerous health impacts and have severe allergic reactions if they ate something that was in the same area of a factory where tree nuts were processed, which is why you have that label warning people about a product now. And you only have that label because something went wrong. So this is like another example of how this kind of contamination can occur, not necessarily due to purposely sinister or nefarious actions on the part of producers, but almost certainly due to negligence. And that's being very fair. I would say that's being very fair, Matt.
I think that is being fair. And to my mind, Ben, this would be as if someone with a peanut allergy purchased something like fried corn, some kind of fried corn thing, and it was fried in peanut oil. But it just it doesn't mention that, oh, by the way, it was fried in peanut oil, or whatever. I don't know. That's not a good example.
There's even
end.
like sorting facilities where, I don't know if you've ever gotten like some tater tots from a fast food restaurant and there was a French fry in there too. How'd that get in there? I mean, there's certainly, obviously with things like allergies, there are FDA, procedures and approvals that would require you definitely not ever mix, but there certainly could be contamination, or if a company's making multiple products that contain different types of nuts and then one, gets intermingled with the other, certainly could happen.
I always thought that meant they had a crush on me. Oh, well. Live and learn. Learn.
Look, you guys, this is the last important thing to know. I was asking you about your products that you use to get ready in the morning, because I'm going to give you a list here from the Guardian article of companies and brands that have, they've voluntarily recalled a bunch of their stuff. So according to the Guardian, Procter & Gamble, Bayer, CVS, and Johnson & Johnson have issued voluntary recalls, this is a quote, for widely distributed brands including Brute, Sure, Pantene, Herbal Essences, Old Spice, Secret, Tinactin, Lotrimin, Coppertone, Neutrogena, and Aveeno. Here's a really, I know I've used a few of those like very recently. Great.
If only you just used products from manscaped.com, Matt, you could avoid these kind of complications.
But do they have beard oil?
Yeah, I think so. And they don't use tree nuts. They just use these nuts.
And benzene as a lubricant.
Okay. This is so hard to... Okay, I don't want to get into the fully scary part, because it really does freak me out. Just the thought that the FDA is supposed to have a handle on a lot of this stuff. They're supposed to be watching. We think of them that way, at least, the Food and Drug Administration. We think, oh, that's a protection agency that's going to keep us safe. But really what they're doing is putting standards in place, and then companies self-report, these are the ingredients in this thing. There are no... there's none of this, there's none of that. The benzene is 2 parts per million maximum, which is the limit. And we just kind of take everyone's word as though it's true. I don't know.
Yeah,
go ahead.
It's just like, okay, so I want to do a better on the fly comparison, because again, as I say, like a lot of the best learning is experiential or through, analogy, right? Root it in something So imagine, like, not many people in the world are the heads of compliance at large companies like this, but a lot of people drive cars. So imagine if the US said, just to save some cost here, speeding is going to be on you. So you need to report to us when you're speeding. Otherwise, we're going to take you at your word that you're doing the limit until you tell us otherwise. Or maybe once every few years, we'll have someone go to a city and see how many people are actually doing 45 miles an hour in the 45 zone, and then act so surprised when it turns out that none of them are.
Dude, you get harassed in Atlanta for going 45 in the 45 zone. You will get like sideswiped.
And the answer, by the way, is not crack down on the people going above 45. It's to change the speed limit to 55. Which is like, if you think about that with the FDA, like there are good people working at the FDA. No, look, I know you're out there. I know you're trying to do your job. It feels as though rather than crack down on the companies producing products that have toxic stuff in them, the parts per million, parts per billion, or whatever the number is, gets raised a little bit because it feels as though it is necessary for a large amount of business to continue. Right. It's still safe. We'll run some more tests. It feels a little, it's a little worse, but 4 parts per million isn't that bad compared to 2 parts per million. I don't know. It feels that way to me as a consumer reading these kinds of reports from an independent study from an independent company.
Yeah. And then also the reason it's not quite the same as that off the cuff speeding analogy is that it's often normal for people to go, 5 to 10 over on an interstate, especially here in the fair metropolis of Atlanta, because a bit of speed over the limit is normally accepted as still being safe. But there's not really an acceptable threshold of benzene exposure, right? There's not this is just 2 miles over kind of comparison here.
Yeah, exactly. Again, like what I've seen written here is 2 parts per million of benzene is like not okay, but that's the absolute maximum you're supposed to have. Guys, I started this off by talking about the variance between batches, right? In this Valisure study, they found in a ton of these products, they get the same product in different batches. One would have unacceptable benzene levels. The other one would have 0 benzene in it.
So you're saying there's a chance that will be okay 15 to 20 years from now. Okay.
Yeah. I don't want to talk about this anymore, guys. The study's out there if you want to find it.
The chemical is called benzene. I don't know. Ben, got anything to say for yourself?
It is indeed named after me, but in a much earlier iteration.
Okay. All right.
I've changed my ways. But yeah.
You're shriven.
Yeah. So I'm not joking about the cancer thing too. That's the most dangerous part about this is that the long-term, like asbestos and mesothelioma, the long-term effects can lag for decades before they become apparent. So yeah, this is not, oh boy. Check out our sunscreen episode.
Check that one out. There's many aerosolized body sprays were affected or were at least found by the same company to have issues with benzene. There was also a whole issue with, what was it? A lot of the hand sanitizers that were manufactured immediately when the pandemic started, just people got into the hand sanitizer game, and benzene was found in a lot of those, especially the ones that were off-brand. So just beware of that. And they were considered, what was it? In a time of crisis, I forget the exact quotation, but the FDA and other agencies or other groups were like, you know what? The small amount of benzene in here actually provides, a therapeutic thing in the form of like killing stuff that might be on your hands and possibly the virus. But it's not so great anymore. Let's not do that anymore. Also check out the FDA.gov website and search for FDA alerts drug manufacturers to the risk of benzene contamination in certain drugs. That's another thing that you won't want to have read after you read it, but it's important. And if you want to learn more about benzene, head over to cancer.org and just type in benzene and cancer risk. Good stuff.
And while you are on the internet, we want to thank you for spending some time with us today. We'd also love to hear from you. What do you think the ethical quandaries of bringing a mammal's brain back from the dead are? What do you think they will be in the future? What do you think about benzene being everywhere. What do you think about the future of propaganda when it goes to the world of deep fakes? All of these questions, especially in this week's segment, are going to be increasingly important in the future. So we would love to hear your predictions, love to hear your takes. We try to be easy to find online.
Yes. You can find us all over the World Wide Web. That's what they used to call it, right? The internet. You know the thing. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on YouTube under the handle Conspiracy Stuff. On Instagram, we are Conspiracy Stuff Show.
If you don't like social media, why not give us a call instead? Our number is 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, give yourself a cool nickname. Let us know if we can use your voice and message on the air. And then you've got 3 minutes. Do whatever you want. You can leave a 30-second message if you want. You can leave a 2-minute and 52-second message. Whatever you choose. But you can't leave more than that. Because that's just how the system works. We can't control that, okay? It's just the tech. We do ask that if you've got more to say than can fit in that 3 minutes, instead, send us a good old-fashioned email. We are
conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.